about theory here. We're not talking about faith. We're talking about a very real, large universe that is very, very coherent and very, very magical, essentially. And the containment that we find is really a game of keeping us just in one density, in the third density. And again, as I said earlier, left to our own devices, we naturally ascend through those different dimensions and experiences, and it's quite normal. But it's been taken so out of the syllabus, so off the intellectual curriculum. No one in school is learning about this stuff, and the only people who touch on it are physicists or classical historians who will look at religious systems of thought. But they're so stupefied and so myopic that most people don't really go very far with it, because it's very dull, in fact. So we have to take it upon ourselves to move into a transformation of our own design, really. So that word transformation is something that we do consciously to say, you can't just be the same entity, the same guy or the same girl when you go on this spiritual journey and just do it as a hobby, or just do it now and again when you can fit it in. It's something that begins to shape your whole life inside and out. And you can either let transformation happen to you from the outside, apparently, or you can actually take hold of it and grasp it and say, right, I'm going to go with this. And I can't quite control it, because it has an intellect, and it has a spirit and a direction of its own, which is working in a way that I don't understand. However, like the surfer on the wave, I can make movements and choices in how I go with that flow. So rather than just sort of crash and burn, I can, with a little bit of grace and a little bit of skill, I can actually move with it. And that's what we mean by transformation in this sense. Awakening, enlightenment, all those different terms, that's a process. That's a process of becoming wiser, of increasing the vibration of our being, of our consciousness, from a low state like a rock to a higher state like a plant or a tree, and a higher state like a human, and then a higher state of beings that we call mythological beings, and higher still, until you move away from self altogether and enter into what the Victorians would call the celestial realms, or the heavenly realms, as the Buddhists would say. And these spaces are just part of the university of consciousness that we move through, and it's quite normal. It takes a long time, many thousands of years. You don't just do it in your 100-year allotment on Earth. It takes a long time. We know that awakening is a process. We know that transformation is a process. And so you can't really go wrong with it, horribly wrong with it at least. The worst you can do is delay this journey. And most people, that's exactly what they do, because they don't really want it, because the unknown part of that transformation is quite scary to a lot of people. And they're afraid of how it will affect their families and their livelihoods and the bank balances and, what's in the refrigerator next week. And that's understandable, and everybody knows what that feels like, everybody. What the trick is, the art of it, is integrating it incrementally, bit by bit, all day, every day, but in ways that you can design and manage yourself. So sometimes it's just a way of looking at the world in a more disciplined and discerning fashion. And other times, exercising a bit of intellect in being, your own sort of scholar or your own teacher. And then other times, it's about pushing out your comfort zone, pushing your boundaries a bit further out, going to places that you don't know much about, going to a conference or a gathering that you don't need to go to, but it will be really a positive shift for you. And some people are a bit shy about that, and not everybody finds that easy to do. But that's part of the initiation, is pushing yourself out of your comfort zone and saying, okay, I know I don't really like doing that kind of stuff, but I'm going to do it anyway. What the hell? I'm going to push myself into that zone. And 9 times out of 10, certainly people I've spoken to have shared their time with me, and that happens, it's always a good result. And the universe rewards risk takers in that fashion.
Okay, well, guys, we had a little bit of an issue here with our connections, and we got everything reset. and I think we're back on, except for Ramon's buzzing and beeping on his hotel phone. What's going on there, bud?
I got it. Don't worry, turn it off. Sorry.
Okay, so back into things. So Neil, there was a question I wanted to ask at the panel discussion at ESETI last week and wasn't able to. Here it goes. As above, so below. Many changes are taking place within humanity and our biosphere, looking at what we have begun to understand about other dimensions and beings who exist in those dimensions, and also considering the societal structure of this world with the corruption, greed, violence, compartmentalization, etc., 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 that we witness. I have asked myself what, if any, changes are these other beings and dimensions going through at this time also?
Wow, that's quite a question, isn't it? It's a shame you didn't get a chance to put that to the panel because that's a
Yes.
cracker. I think the simple answer to that question is that if you perceive the different densities of reality from the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, those seven dimensions as nested like Russian dolls all inside each other. It used to puzzle people in the past when they'd say, well, why do the such and such a beings from another system give a shit about what's happening on this little dust ball on one corner of one solar system in one part of a little galaxy? Why should that affect things? Um, the reason is when you comprehend this dimensional model that because each dimension enfolds the preceding ones, in other words, we could say that there's a density of being which, let us say, for example, that a rock is a first density being, and a tree is a second density being, and a human is a third density being. Our third density obviously includes those preceding ones, so we can see the trees and we can see the rocks. The fourth density that wraps around us includes us, so what we do affects them, just like if all the trees burn down, that affects us. Now, it's not just space we're talking about here, it's actually the frequency of consciousness itself. And that can be understood as a waveform, as an oscillation, if you like. So if you think that everything vibrates at a certain pace, certain frequency, then the faster it vibrates, the more oscillation there is, the closer those waves are together, the more it can move between those dimensional spaces. So to cut a long story short, it is an ecology, just like any other ecology, and everything that takes place in that affects everything. So one drop in the ocean affects the whole ocean, some in subtle ways and some areas in very profound ways. And my understanding, my comprehension of how this universe fits together, which is a synthesis of mystical information, spiritual law, and spiritual philosophy and physics, and my own observations, my own work in those areas, some of it normal, some of it esoteric. If you put all that stuff together, it certainly shows to me that there is this very sophisticated and very beautiful model of what you could really divide down into seven spaces, seven densities. And the big problem on Earth at the moment, and that has been for at least 4,000 years, probably about six, maybe even 12. It's difficult to tell right now, but we will know. But right now, it's not available at our fingertips. But the big problem on Earth for a long time, let us say, has been that we've been convinced and deceived into thinking that there is only one density, and that's the third density, and that's it. So any thoughts or any notions of mythological beings or nature spirits or extraterrestrials, Andromedans, Venusians, Pleiadians, Arcturians, whatever, that is just crazy talk, really. That is just the talk of people who've gone off the page, off the map, off the sort of, railway tracks altogether. And that's understandable when you're only operating on that third frequency, in that third space, in that third density, because that is all that you see when you're in that space, and anything outside it seems unimaginable. And to some people, that makes them scared, and to other people, it makes them laugh. But they both